in Lancashire, which is in the northwest of England. While it has many attributes and a lot going for it, one of the best parts about Lytham St Annes is that it's not Blackpool. In the early 20th century, a number of attempts were made to amalgamate the two towns, but they were fiercely resisted. Instead, in 1922, the two boroughs of Lytham and St Annes, they amalgamated and they formed the new borough of Lytham St Annes. This nestles on the coast just where the River Ribble meets the Irish Sea. Early maps show Lytham as a very small community with a priory and a few cottages. The area used to be known at that time as Amounderness, which harks back to Viking connections, as the area was on the main route between the two major Viking cities of Dublin and York. After the dissolution of the monasteries, the land was sold and in 1606 was bought by a member of the Clifton family, and it remained in the ownership of the family until 1963. In 1863, under the influence of the Clifton family, a railway line was built, linking Lytham with the new resort of Blackpool. In 1871, the line was extended to Preston. The Clifton family provided much of the capital for this, foreseeing both the expansion of Blackpool as a holiday resort and the opportunity of creating a new town along the route. At the same time, a decision had been made to build a new church. The foundation stone was laid in 1872 by Lady Clifton, and the church was dedicated to St Anne, reputedly in the memory of her aunt, Lady Anne Bentinck. At the same time, a road was built between the church and the sea, and the railway station was put halfway along it. This was swiftly followed by a hotel, about which we will hear a lot more anon, and the first few shops on what was to become St Anne's Square. By 1885, St Anne's was beginning to show its ambition to become a holiday resort by the opening of the St Anne's Pier. It was 350 yards long, and as well as allowing people to take the sea air, it also allowed boats to tie up and to run commercial services to Liverpool, Southport and Fleetwood. In 1909, the pier was extended and the Moorish Pavilion and the Floral Hall was added onto it. The Floral Hall had a ladies' orchestra, and guest artists included Gracie Fields and George Formby. In later years, the conductor was the very suave Lionel Johns. In the 1980s, two fires destroyed both the Floral Hall and the theatre, and the pier had to be shortened for safety reasons, leaving the pier as you can see it today. They made the best of what was left, and it now looks quite clean and quite neat, but it does lack the grandeur of the Floral Hall, the theatre, and the little sweet shop that the Finniston family used to run next to the Floral Hall. The entrance still looks much as it always did. Next to the pier, the children's paddling pool doesn't seem to have changed very much over the years. And next to the paddling pool is a memorial to the 13 crew members of the lifeboat Laura Jane, who were lost trying to save the crew of the ship Mexico in December 1886. The crew of the Mexico were saved, but 27 men from the Southport and St Anne's lifeboats were drowned. The wrecked lifeboat was found a fortnight later, but it was nearly a year before all the bodies had been recovered from the sea. The first buildings put up in what was to become St Anne's Square were built in about 1876. More followed pretty quickly, and before too long, St Anne's Road West, as it's formerly known, took on the form and character which it still retains to this day. In recent years, attempts have been made to try and give the square a bit of a facelift, but I can't believe that this plethora of wrought ironwork actually does anything to enhance the square. Nor do I think all this wrought iron is any improvement at all on this. Similarly, the Majestic Hotel, a magnificent edifice by any standards, and which was built in 1908, was eventually demolished in 1976, and it was replaced with this, which I don't think is anything like as impressive. The area is very flat, and the only three hills in the town are those which put bridges over the railway line. This one, at the end of the square, is called the Crescent, and over the years is not very much changed, apart from the amount of traffic. The town does have one international claim to fame, and that is based around its golf courses. There are 4 of them in all, but the most famous of them is this one, Royal Lytham, which has hosted more British Open Championships than any other club in the country. It was founded in 1886 and it moved to its present course in 1897. In 1926, King George allowed it to use the prefix Royal. When the Open is being played at the Royal Lytham, the other 3 courses in the town are used for qualifying and practicing rounds. The Old Links Club was formed in 1901 and encompasses part of the original St Annes golf course. Green Drive was opened in 1913, but was remodelled in the 1940s by James Steer, who became their professional. He had had some experience, having already designed the course at Fairhaven, which opened in 1934. Just as London-based entertainers used Brighton as a place to live, so in the north, St Annes and Blackpool were popular places for entertainers to come and make their home. 2 of the most notable of these were George Formby, who came to live in St Annes in the 1950s and remained there until his death in the beginning of the 1960s. This is the house he lived in on the St Annes Promenade, and to which every evening I delivered his newspaper. A little later on came Les Dawson, who was very much part of the local scene until his death in 1993. A few years later, a statue was put up to him near St Annes Pier. I think he would have been very pleased with this. In 1886, a private company opened a park called St George's Gardens. It was not a success or very well looked after, and by 1913 had rather gone to waste. The company wanted to sell it to the council, and at this stage Lord Ashton, a philanthropist from Lancaster who loved St Annes, stepped in, bought the gardens and presented them to the council. The gardens were refurbished, renamed after his lordship, and reopened in 1916. In 1912, the splendidly named Empire Deluxe Picturedrome was opened. It continued as a cinema until 1988, but then, as many other cinemas, it became a bingo hall, it then closed, and it was demolished in 2005, a sad loss. As we saw earlier, one of the very first buildings to go up in the 1870s was the St Annes Hotel. Naturally, the hotel would have a bar. This one, in fact, had 2 bars, and as you can see, they're advertising the second-class bar. It became known rather unfairly as the Rat Pit. Why it should be called that, I don't know, because as you can see, it has a wonderful display of Victorian tiling. Another early addition to the drinking scene was the Victoria Hotel, built in 1897. There is a story, possibly apocryphal, that it was built on the orders of the owner of Boddington's Brewery in Manchester, so that he would have somewhere to drink his own beer when he came to St Annes for his holiday. Then, of course, there was the Majestic Hotel again, which was so big and so busy that it became a haven for young men who were not quite old enough to drink there legally, because they would never be noticed. The hotel also offered many other kinds of recreation and relaxation. There were always plenty of places to go to drink in St Annes, but there were no purpose-built pubs. They were all in hotel bars. That is until the 60s, when Dutton's Blackburn Brewery, famous for their OBJ ale, decided to open two brand new purpose-built pubs, one in St Annes, which was called the Queensway, and one in Lytham called the Blossoms. These were the height of sophistication and the places to be seen. In 1719, a terrible flood and storm almost devastated Lytham. The aftermath was the setting up of the Lytham Schools Fund in order to provide funds to build educational facilities for the local children. Almost 200 years later, it was monies from this fund that set about the foundation of King Edward VII Grammar School in 1908. A boys-only school, it was followed in 1930 by its sister school on adjacent premises, Queen Mary's. For nearly 50 years, they tried to keep the pupils of each school quite far apart, but in the end, in 1999, they gave up and the two schools merged to form one co-educational establishment. In 2012, there was a further merger with Arnold School in Blackpool to form AKS. The newly amalgamated school uses the King Edward premises. If anyone ever wondered whether the school was actually in Lytham or in St Annes, the answer is yes. In 1908, the two councils agreed to move the town boundaries so that half the school was in one town and the other half in the other. The body of water you see behind the school here is not the sea, but it is in fact Fairhaven Lake. This park, garden and boating lake was formed in the 1890s by a private company. They ran it until 1926, when Lord Ashton, the same man who had bought the gardens in St Annes, bought it from the company and donated it to the local council for the free benefit of the whole community. It looks quiet and peaceful enough here, but in the summer days it can get very, very busy indeed. On the top right of this picture you can see the tower of the Fairhaven United Church, or the White Church as it's known everywhere. A very arresting looking building which catches your eye just as you're leaving St Annes to go into Lytham. And now we come to Lytham itself. By gum. This film, shot in 1903 outside the Clifton Arms Hotel, shows how little the area around Lytham Green and the windmill has changed over 117 years. This is as it was then. And this is as it is now. The windmill on Lytham Green is one of Lytham's most iconic features. There has been a windmill in Lytham for hundreds of years, and the current one was built in 1805. It was seriously damaged in 1919 and lay derelict until 1921, when it was refurbished. In 1989 it was taken over by the local council and is run now as a museum. The centre of Lytham is not much changed since these photos were taken 100 years ago. The Market Hall here is one of nearly 100 listed buildings in the town. The tree-lined streets of the town retain much of their Victorian charm. And while fashions and designs change, there is much here that remains unchanged. There is a certain timeless quality that is very appealing. Only the vehicles change. The atmosphere in town remains serene and at a different age, and yet it does this without appearing old-fashioned. Lytham and St Annes are distinct towns, one from the other, each with its own particular ambience and environment. As well as having branches of many of the famous high street names, Lytham is full of independent shops, many of which have been run by generations of the same family. And there is no shop smaller or more independent than this one. It won't take more than 3 people, but it does sell the most terrific Lancashire cheese. And on that tasty note, we'll leave Lytham with its windmill looking much as it's always done, and much as I hope it always will do.